podcasts.
Hello. Hi, everyone, and welcome. First, a couple words of, well, let's say organization. We have a photographer here today with us. If you don't want to be photographed, maybe, yeah, just raise your hand so that we know. Or the photographer is over there, so you can also just say whatever. It's all fine. What we also do is we will record this evening. We intentionally said we're not streaming live, and you know why? It's because we're in real life together, and that's what matters. And we know that from when you say, oh, we're also streaming the event, people say, it's raining, you know what? I'll just watch from home. So that's what we decided not to do. And therefore, I just wanted to thank you for being here today. So yes, that's it. We're going to get started. Are we ready? We're ready. We have the speakers ready. They're here. We're prepared. And yeah, maybe you can also come up stage. Alice Twemlow.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Roosje Klap. I'm a graphic designer. And I'm not just a graphic designer. I'm also a member of the Wim Krauwel Institute. And the Wim Krauwel Institute is a foundation for design, for archiving design from the then, as we say, but also from the now. So we work with the archives, which was previously the NAGO archive, and we try to figure out if we can somehow make sure that our heritage is kept. So that's one of the things we do. The board is here also today. Some of them are here, some of them are there. They're here and there everywhere. So welcome to the board. One of the things that we do, I think, is really nice, and that's that it's all graphic, and that's this event. This is already the 10th time that we're organizing this. Each time there's a theme that we find important to address. And this time, it's a very specific theme. Alice will elaborate a little bit more on that, because it's all about exhibiting graphic design. Obviously, graphic design was not meant for making exhibitions.
That's my bit.
Oh, that's your bit. I'm not going to say something about that. You're going to say something about that before I introduce you. It's funny because we shared notes, and then I said, and then here's art historian Alice Twemlow, and then, no, it was immediately crossed, design historian Alice Twemlow. So, Alice, would you tell us what we're going to do tonight?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Roosje. Well, it is important. But yes, I'm Alice Twemlow, and it's always fun working with Roosje. And I'm basically here tonight as professor by special appointment and the Wim Krauwel Chair in Graphic Design, History, Theory and Sociology at the University of Amsterdam. And this is a really amazing role created by the Wim Krauwel Institute to do exactly what Roosje just described, which is to kind of preserve this, or initiate, in some cases, the link between graphic design heritage, graphic design practice, and sort of pointing toward the future of graphic design, wherever that's headed. So that's what I am in relation to this. And I teach a class there called Rereading the Graphic Design Archive, Reframing the Graphic Design Collection. And we look at how, and these, just so you understand, these aren't designers. These are people in University of Amsterdam from all different disciplines, social sciences, conservation, cultural studies, this kind of thing. And we look at how graphic design is collected, curated, and displayed in a range of museum and what I call more than museum settings. In the global north, roughly speaking, graphic design artifacts have been acquired, you know, since the 1800s. You could all figure out your start date. But museums of art, design, and decorative arts have collected them, but also in museums devoted to any other topic, right? And that's the thing about graphic design. So railway museums, you know, medicine, Jewish history, you name it. You will, if you look hard enough, find a collection of graphic design there. And, you know, in fact, the very same artifact can be collected by multiple museums, but for different reasons. So for example, if you have a circus poster, that might be in the Museum of a City's History, in New York, for example, or a Museum of Theatre and Performance, right? But there it's usually displayed for its content, for what it tells us as a historical document, as a source. And if it's hung in an art museum, sometimes it's there, this isn't, I'm generalizing, but often it's there because it's somehow considered to closely resemble what the current definition is of art, right? So this is a tension that sits around this topic, I think. So I think it's quite rare where we find spaces and situations where graphic design is exhibited as itself, as neither purely content nor purely context, but rather, being itself and in all its full complexity. And I hope we'll get some examples of that with our speakers tonight. So I set my students an assignment. This is assignment number 3 in the course, where I asked them to select an aspect of graphic design collecting or exhibiting practice where they've identified omissions, exclusions, bias, a problem, basically. And they can deal with this in a very particular collection or museum or exhibiting practice, or they can speak more generally. They have to do all the thing, like write a paper and unpack and problematize, do their literature review and all those good things. But I also ask them to propose and demonstrate a new tool or a tactic, an intervention that helps to, they think can help redress or repair that problem. And I really liked what they've, I'm just going to read a couple of examples of what they've come up with. And, they really hit on some of the issues that I think anyone working in this field is also trying to deal with. So one of them was called, Exploring the Roles of Women in Graphic Design Towards a Messier Design History. I like that one. Another student wanted to focus in on the issue of anonymity. You know, when you get the anonymous thing on a label, and you're like, I know you did that. Or, well, but they were trying to say there are many different, there are nuances to that could be included. They've listed unsigned, unattributed, unidentified, nameless, or, purposefully concealed, because obviously sometimes people have to protect their identity. So already you've got a kind of a different language at play in the captions. Another one proposed to reactivate Lina Bobadi's crystal easels as a display strategy. I don't know if you've seen this. They've actually got a small part of this at the Boymans depot. But this allows you to see the front and the back, which is a really nice way of thinking of it. One of them wants to collect digital typeface design and is thinking about how to do that through all the iterations, all of the, when the feedback has been taken into account. This sort of really messy, it's not just one artifact and how you might account for that in a museum setting. Another wanted to make space for Chinese protest posters. She doesn't see that anywhere. She doesn't see the stuff she sees on her streets reflected in museum collections. And lastly, I just noted this one was called Design Inclusio, and this would be a platform for empowering diverse graphic designers. And it would kind of hook onto museum databases and collections. So I find this quite promising, actually, for the first try. And these, just the idea that they're already contributing ideas that I think reach out beyond the academy into certainly curatorial practice and some of the things we're dealing with. So don't worry, I'm not going to set you an assignment. I am going to move on quickly from that. But I did want to show that link because it is part, I feel, of the mission of this chair. But what we've done tonight is we've gathered a selection of curators, designers, and directors at institutions. Some are at the national level, some are hyper-local, to share from their perspectives the practices of acquiring, interpreting, and framing, and I'm using that a little more metaphorically than actually framing, but maybe we'll get to that too, but graphic design. They're going to make quite short presentations to introduce us to their worlds, and then we're going to gather them back up here for discussion, and there'll also be some time to take questions from you guys as well. So yeah, I should just say we will want people to save that to the end, right? Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to urge them, I don't know if we mentioned this to them yet, but now they know, to divulge their individual ambitions and achievements in reaching new audiences. I think this is a big concern, right, in the curation of graphic design. Diversifying the canon, as well as any doubts and dilemmas that come up, concerning graphic design's cultural significance. And it's what I see as a very tense, ever-tense relationship with these notions of aura that I mentioned before, and the white cube. Speaking of which, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, and that's Peter Bielak. Oh yeah, thanks. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's good, yeah, the clicker. We only have one.
Yeah, okay. So it's quite a long time ago, right? 2006, I think it was indeed, yes. Yeah, the exhibition in, yeah, we have to cast our minds back. Peter Bielak curated an exhibition and for what we understand now, sadly, former International Biennale of Graphic Design in Brno. And he wrote a catalogue essay where he problematized graphic design's relationship to the white cube. And this notion of white cube is going to probably come up quite a bit tonight, so let's just get it set. It comes from this very widely circulated three-part essay written for Art Forum, 1976, by art critic Brian O'Doherty. And he drew attention to the role that what he called the kind of unshadowed, clean whiteness of the modernist gallery, what that does, right, to our understanding of the art that it holds. And he writes he's quite cool about it, He says, it gives the gallery a limbo-like status. One has to have died already to be there, end quote. And I think that's something we might return to. And in 2006, Peter Bielak wrote, he put it even more bluntly, I think. He said, presenting design in an exhibition space is akin to looking at a collection of stuffed birds in order to study how they fly and sing. And it's interesting, actually, I'll ask you about this, but how often this kind of trope of stuffed dead animals comes up in relation to the exhibiting of graphic design? Maybe it's that, I don't know, but it's a thing. So we wanted Peter to kind of revisit this essay in a way and see what's still the same, what may have changed, and how museums and galleries attempt to create context, because that's what we're talking about, right? The problem that's always perceived is that when you take graphic design from the street, from your feed, from the mess of life, and put it into the museum, something is lost, something dies, something... and people find it hard to deal with this. So that's something we're going to look at. Peter Bielak is the founder of Typethek, co-founder of FontStand, as well as TBTQ Arabic, a company focused on the development of modern and authentic Arabic typeface. I think we know him really for his meticulous type design and typography, and a deep engagement with content and language. And language is really, really key to what he does. He co-founded ... and also Works That Work, a magazine of unexpected creativity that not only broadened the definition of design, but also introduced new models of operation and distribution, which I've always really loved. His long-standing collaboration with the choreographer and fellow Slovakian Lukas Timolak led to starting Make, Move, Think, a foundation for interdisciplinary artistic collaboration. Please welcome to the stage. You get to pick your table, Peter.
Maybe
Peter Bielak.
A little bit of applause for Peter. No, you can just use these. this, and this, unless you want to walk. Yeah. You want to walk? Okay, fine. Okay, Peter Bielak.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, for the introduction. Thanks for being here. Let me see. It does work. So we're going to talk about exhibiting design. And I think first thing to clear is that I'm not a curator. So I'm a graphic designer. But as designers, and many of us are designers, we are trained to work with context, to understand what are the missing elements we need to pay attention to. And it is the first thing that I think when I was back in school, I had an idea what graphic design was. And after leaving school, I realized it's a bit more complicated. And I didn't know anymore what the graphic design was. And the first project, when it forced me to think about it, formalize what graphic design was, is when, together with Stuart Bailey, we started this magazine, ... magazine. And we called it a graphic design magazine. So imagine that it should have content that has to do with graphic design. Except we realized that everything we do is graphic design, and it doesn't need to be, so it can be, a film poster, it can be an album cover, as Alice said, it can be any artifact, which was strangely constraining and liberating at the same time. Liberating because we realized the graphic design was just an angle to look at things, and in a way we could be looking at all sorts of things. It doesn't need to be, surface-driven. Doesn't need to look pretty. It is more about understanding how the relationship between design and public. Had a pretty good run. We published 20 issues, produced, over 10 years, and I think our understanding over time of graphic design has changed and broadened to the fact that if you look at the last issues and first ones, they're dramatically different, and we stopped caring what design was because we realized the context was the magazine itself and the public and the audience. So there was this bubble that we didn't manage to escape, that we are graphic designers and we're publishing for other graphic designers, and anything we put there was seen in the context of graphic design. Because of this experience, working with content and design, I was asked to organize an exhibition. The first exhibition, I was involved at the Biennale Brno, Czech Republic. It was called The Work from the Netherlands, and this was at the heyday, at the time when Dutch graphic design was celebrated worldwide. There were books published. You probably remember that it was a big thing, and they really wanted to show what Dutch graphic design was. And since I lived here, they asked me to collect it, and I felt very uneasy about it because I knew that if we just take it, transport these artifacts from one country to another one, it is not very easy to understand what they mean, why they were created. And I didn't know, how to explain it, because you cannot stand there to explain to every single visitor. So the attempt to contextualize that time graphic design from this country, so it's not just nice-looking images, was to explain that it is something, conditioned by the environment, by the social, economical, political, by all situations which is created in this country. And we did it by, I was asking every designer to supply the brief. Why was it made? All the technical details to see that this design was actually a question, and what you see is the answer. And if you understand the question, it's much easier to understand what this is trying to do. So the design was not just reduced to the pretty images, but was trying to see that this is part of something bigger. It was partly successful. Not every design bureau was willing to divulge the details about budgets and details. But if it did, it provided some context to understand, again, the play. So you don't compare the results, but you compare the entire, question, answer, the triangle of public, commissioner, designer. And a few years later, as Alice said, I was asked to do a different exhibition, this time not presenting a fixed selection of people, but to consider how to present design. So it was slightly more ambitious, and I could choose the people that would represent design of that time, 2006. And instead of bringing work from outside to the gallery, the idea was very simple. Let's create work for the gallery. So instead of contextualizing something. The gallery was the context. So there's no work to start with. Instead, there was a design proposal, design commission to selected individuals. Armand was one of them, and each was them were asked to design a poster which was serving double function. On one hand, it was an exhibit in this room in the gallery, which was exhibited as an artwork. On the other hand, it had to be functional enough that it was placed on the streets of Brno, serving as an invitation to come. So it had to function. It had to bring people to the exhibition. So there was a brief which was provided to all designers. Designers got paid to produce the work, new work, and each work was documented. Part of the game was that all sketches, everything was produced, was kept and presented also in the exhibition. So you see the entire process. You see the brief, you see the process, and you see the result. And this was a simple attempt to explain how design functions. Because it is a problem, it works when design is a noun, but when it becomes a product, it becomes something else. So this was an attempt to visualize that this is part of the process. And so there was, I don't remember how many, two dozens of designers creating the work. Again, presented in a very simple way with the final poster, but the entire process of how it was created. So again, it can guide the person, the visitor, through the process. I think by that I learned a little bit about what is design, and it brought me to another project. I think this is a story of our lives, that every project leads to some other project, and after finishing ... after finishing a couple of exhibitions, I was left curious about what is design, and if there's even different understanding or definition of design, and how can be discussed, because my experience was that it usually works only with these bubbles, and when you burst those bubbles, when it's presented to different audiences, those definitions cease to work. Another project we just started just at the end in 2014 was Works at Work magazine, and I deliberately avoided the word design magazines from the title, so it was called Magazine of Unexpected Creativity, because the focus went not so much to the makers of things, but to the artifacts, the objects. And we have certain, again, understanding of this is design, and it's spectacular objects which we collect, and they look different than anything else. And we struggle to see if something like this qualifies as a definition. Functionally does similar things, but aesthetically looks very different. So the aesthetics of the objects matter a lot. But in this project, in this magazine, we decided not to pay attention to surface or aesthetics or who makes it or how much it costs, but only look at the impact, what it actually means for people. And if you look at that, then those two objects are pretty much the same because they're seating objects, and allows discussing mundane objects. Like half of the room recognize what this is. The other half of the room probably invite you to Schiphol Airport, where this etched fly is etched in a urinal. And in this magazine, we could talk about these things and go quite in depth. What is the impact of putting this image there? That it reduces the cleaning cost because men are so simple that they focus on suddenly it reduces the splashing. So in a funny way, it would allow discussing things which are often overlooked, because most of design discussions is focused on individuals, on personalities, and not so much on the meaning of the objects. And this way we could talk about serious subjects, for example, the siege of Sarajevo, which was a tragic, but always discussing news as kind of, on a macro level of, how, the very zoomed out version of you see it from distance and affects thousands of people, but not so much on what it means for individuals. Like individuals survived it because they had to be creative. They had surplus of time and lack of resources, which is the definition of creativity, where you have to kind of reinvent yourselves. So we would collect these objects from people who survived the siege of Sarajevo, and each of those objects had a story which was very meaningful to the individuals about how it made their life more bearable, more easier, and how they had to create something from nothing. And these stories we would wrap, and this would be the premise of basically the entire magazine. So, so these are some ideas about how we always busy to talk about something bigger, but at the end our work is surface-based. Thank you.
I have one question for you. Thank you so much, Peter. I have one question for you, which we have to do quite briefly to keep up to our little schedule. So it occurs to me that graphic design might be quite unique amongst the arts disciplines, in that sometimes, the subject of the exhibition, the designer of the exhibition, and the curator of that exhibition can all be the same person. And whether or not that's you or others you've observed, can you just reflect on what you think what advantages that might bring, or what disadvantages? Like, what does that do to the exhibition?
Well, I mentioned a couple of times the bubbles in which design exists, and I live in the real world, and my neighbors often ask what I do, and I struggle, to see, like, I always have different answers depending who asks. And I wish it was much easier to talk to someone who is not designer to explain what it does, because if I say graphic designer, they think I'm designing business cards, and they will ask me to design business cards, and I always feel like, like I'd rather not. So so I do think that there's a way to talk about the significance or the importance, the impact of the work, and how it can be relevant to someone else. But that can only happen when you make the work inviting to someone else. So if you reduce it to that the subject and the curator and the object of the exhibition is itself, then it serves a singular function for that one person. And what I'm interested in is to expand it as much as possible, to invite more people. And you do it by conscious process, by thinking about inclusion of others, which I'm sure we'll be discussing in a bit.
Lovely. Let's proceed. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, indeed. We're going to meet our next speaker very soon. Yeah, precies. I wanted to ask for the clicker, but the clicker's here. Yeah, so the next speaker is our international speaker, Marina Bakic. Very complicated name because you spell it with 2 I's, and every time my autocorrect wanted to write your name, it said Marina with 1 I. But now I guess I reframed my AI in my telephone now, that it knows now that there's only one Marina, and that is spelled with 2 I's. So Marina is the head of Department and Creation and Transmission. I don't really know what that is, but maybe you can explain that, at Le Signe, le National Centre de Graphic Design in Chaumont in France. And Le Signe has a significant collection of posters, and maybe even one of the only graphic design museums left in Europe, I think. They also organize quite a famous graphic design festival that is actually now on show until the 21st of October. And they run a program of exhibitions, workshops, residencies, training courses, all for the development and outreach of graphic design in France and in the world. So what Bakic's background is actually digital and interactive. After earning her doctorate and several years of teaching in new media at the University of Paris, she got involved in the organization of graphic design events. One other very important event that some of you probably know, which is Le Havre, that she led that festival before joining Le Signe in 2017. So Marina will discuss how the museum negotiates its multiple roles, I think, as the collector, but also the preserver, and maybe the framer of graphic design, as well as the stimulator of the contemporary graphic design practice. Marina, would you mind coming to the stage? And here's your clicker. Water, also very important. Yeah, do you want to do this one? Yeah? All right. Marina Bakic.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be in Amsterdam tonight, and thank you so much for inviting me. And well, I was thinking that it would be nice tonight to tell you a little story about Chaumont, how a little city in the middle of the Grand Est region in France became the city of graphic design. So here we are now, what it looks like today. We are now today in Le Cygne, a unique center dedicated to graphic design in Europe and perhaps even in the whole world, because we really do the whole activity of the art center. It is dedicated 100% to graphic design. That means that we have the whole year running shows, exhibitions of graphic designs, designer or graphic design. It may be 4 or 5 exhibitions outside of the biennale year and up to 15 on a biennale year. Outside of that, we have also a very full pedagogical program, and so we are dedicated to support contemporary art as creation, diffusion, transmission, and pedagogy. And this is, today we, in Le Cygne, we are talking from a public institution. We are supported by the city of Chaumont, the region, and the state, the Ministry of Culture. And so nowadays it works as we are the functioning of a public institution. But there were times when things were very different. Actually, it was the friendship, let's say the love story between the city of Chaumont and graphic design started in more than 100 years ago. So this it started with Gustave Dutailly, who donated. When he passed away, he donated the half of this personal collection of posters, but not only both posters. There are also graphic objects such as matchboxes or other kinds of postcards, etc. But many very particular, very consecutive posters. He was a very original gentleman from Chaumont. Botanist, politician, and affichomaniac. Affichomaniac meaning it was a bunch of gentlemen around Paris in the beginning of the 20th century who collected like crazy posters, who grabbed the posters directly whenever they were hanged over in Paris in order to communicate the events. For example, cabarets in Moulin Rouge, etc. So there is a lot of posters from this this period when the French poster was born. The collection, the ancient collection, represents 5,000 pieces from the illustrated posters from the Belle Époque. We have names like Toulouse-Lautrec, Jules Chéret, Choubrac, etc. So it's a very precious, precious collection that had been rediscovered in the 80s in Chaumont. And this was the impulse, the rediscovery of the collection was the re-impulse to the festival of Chaumont. The festival, no, I'm going backwards, sorry. So the collection, Dutailly collection, was rediscovered in the 80s, and in 1990 was founded the Chaumont Festival. First of all, it was called Les Rencontres Internationales Graphiques de Chaumont, Festival d'Affiches, and then at the end, Chaumont Design Graphique. It was a festival that grew throughout the years and exposed. It was the main event in France and maybe in Europe in order to show contemporary graphic design. What was very interesting in the city of Chaumont is that when the collection, the Dutailly collection was discovered, it was that the decision was not was to make something the identity of the city around contemporary graphic design, and not to museumificate the collection, make a museum around ancient posters, but to build up something new, a new impulse for the cultural identity of the city around contemporary graphic design. So throughout the different editions, there were very many curators, art directors. You have many of you have certainly visited the festival back then. Some of you have even designed the visual identity of the festival. Maren, you were one of the last to design the visual identity of the festival before its end, meaning the opening of Le Cygne in 2016. So ever since the Le Cygne is open, we produce exhibitions of around graphic design, may it be monographic exhibitions, collective shows as well, and we have about 4 or 5 exhibitions throughout the year, and even more on a biennial year. We have about 1,000 square meters dedicated to graphic design exhibitions, which is for some, like Richard Nissen here, you are one of the few artists, designers who can really display all your creations around these 1,000 square meters, because we know that we deal sometimes with really small objects too, as designers, as many of you are certainly. So we try, but we have the mission to also to show to show the pluridisciplinarity within graphic design. This is why, for example, Gilles de Broc and all these different stages of his career, coming from poster, experimenting textile, and yet becoming designer of ceramic tiles, or Anja Kaiser, who does as well posters, but also digital digital displays. Well, we have the mission to also to host and to show the different creations and the real signatures in graphic design. As an art center, because this is our administrative status, we have a mission also to be like to show the experimental side of of graphic design. So this is why you will rarely see, let's say, like publicities, advertisement. Yet we, of course, still have our international poster competition. This year it was the 30th edition, and here you have every 2 years a fantastic panel of what is graphic design today, what is the poster design today, and what is the poster commission today as well, because all the posters that you will discover in the jury selection shown in during the Biennale have always this relationship to the context, because they're all commissioned. They have been displayed. They inform. They communicate. Yet there is this really special, I think, touch where we are somewhere in between graphic design, communication, yet almost one step on the side of contemporary art. So I'd like to finish my little presentation for a shout out also to 2 of the board members of the Wim Cowell Institute, Roosje and Caroline. Not yet. And okay, so really you are 2 great ladies who have really much contributed to Chaumont, what is Chaumont today as well. Each one with our own competence, and I must say that also Dutch design and Dutch designers in Netherlands are really close to heart to Chaumont. As you I think that Dutch designers also have done many things for what is Chaumont today. Thank you.
Before you leave the stage, I wanted to ask you one question, because we see here beautiful posters. There's a poster competition even, as my former colleague Niels Schrader often used to say, the poster will be dead very soon. So I'm wondering very much really about, of course, the graphic design is as a discipline really changing, especially under the realm of technology and digital media. And as a museum, I can also imagine that it's very difficult to think about this transmission, not maybe to show the work, but maybe also how to keep that work. How do you store a website or maybe like an installation with screens? So how do you, could you say something about how do you deal with this new technology? Yeah.
Yes, so there are different regimes, I'd say, in Le Cygne, because first of all, so the collection is mainly dedicated to the posters, and we have the collection made. The contemporary collection is our donations made through the international poster competition. So if you want to be that your work will last forever,
bring it to Chaumont.
Bring it to Chaumont and participate, take part to the international poster competition, because the work that participates to the competitions is then kept in our collections, and then we have the mission to conserve it and also to show it again. So we have regularly new shows coming based on the collection, maybe works from the 90s or even really, really recent ones. But then concerning the, as an art center, we are, this is almost an exception that we take care of the collection. Actually, the collection is owned by the city of Chaumont.
Yeah.
And we, as graphic design, as art center, we produce exhibitions. We produce displays like scenography, exhibition design, let's say, or residencies, art residencies, where the piece of work, the artwork, belongs to the artist, to the designer. So we.
So you don't preserve those?
We don't preserve those. No, usually they belong to the artists. We produce or help to finance them, but then it usually belongs to the designer.
Now, I'm curious what this will be in 10 years when there maybe indeed are no posters anymore that is printed, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. And actually, I must say that we have the feeling that there are perhaps a little bit less posters today in the entering the competition, which makes us think that there are less and less good commissions of posters today.
That's what it is. There we go. Hear, hear. Now, maybe this is also a good moment to thank you, Marina, again, and announce our next speaker. I will clickety-click, and then we go to Ali.
Yeah. So next up, well, first of all, I just have to make a note. Affiche Mania, such a good name for an exhibition or horror movie or anything, actually. So thank you for that, Marina. But next up, we have Ali Tiassad, who, amongst other accomplishments, is a member of the curatorial research collective at the Eindhoven University of Technology. He's going to discuss a recent exhibition he designed and curated for the Van Eesteren Museum in Amsterdam New West, which focused on the life and legacy of Benno Premsela. The exhibition used the book collection as the starting point for an investigation that assembled objects, posters, and documents from private collections and institutional archives. And we were actually turned on to this exhibition by Nikki, so thank you for that. It was great to learn of it, and we really think that this exhibition provides a very compelling example of how to explore an aspect of design history, namely that of a designer's life, work, and legacy, but to do that through a contemporary lens, and in this case, it's a queering lens. And to tell us about this and more, please welcome Ali T. Assad.
I'm actually going to sit down. It's also just easier to access the water this way. Hi, everyone. So I want to start off, first of all, by thanking the Wim Kowal Institute and the organizers for inviting me. As you will see, I am an architect and a curator, so I am humbled to be in the same room and to sharing the stage with these pillars of graphic design knowledge. Let's put it like that. And I'm going to be speaking basically from my perspective of two curatorial projects. The first, which Alice described already, Diversifying, which was an exhibition that opened earlier this year, and another curatorial project that was established at Arkham, which is the Architecture Research Center here in Amsterdam, in 2021, and that was called Safe Spaces. So I was invited to curate and design Diversifying at the Van Astelen, which focused specifically on the book collection that they held, a book collection that was a subset of a broader collection that belonged to both Benno Premsela and his partner Friso Broksma. I'm not going to talk so much about the curatorial choices that I took in the project, because I feel like I don't have enough time for that. But also specifically to focus on the subject at hand, which is the graphic design element, how I encounter it, but also how I approach it as a researcher and as a curator. Graphic design, or at least in the formats that I encounter with my work, both my PhD and the research that I did for these two projects, is ostensibly objective-oriented. It specifically operates in a kind of present moment, featuring oriented towards a future event, something that will be set or something that will take place. So in that respect, these objects are temporal objects that kind of oscillate along a spectrum between this orientation towards the future, but then as soon as that moment passes, then they transport into representational objects of the past. And so there's something along that spectrum, an almost liminal space in which an object, a design object, stops becoming an information design, a way of relaying line, text, type, composition, and becomes something that is representative or indicative of part of a larger narrative. The relationship between an individual work and the narrative is obviously very complex. There are lots of graphic design in itself harbors its own narrative, but then when it's set within a larger curatorial context, it also goes beyond its own narrative and becomes part of a larger story. And it is in this space that I wish to kind of maybe unpack and to kind of reveal what I was confronted with as a historian in these moments. And that is the way that I would come to retell those stories and the way I would narrate them. In other words, there becomes kind of an implied difference between how I account for facts and how I tell a story. The curatorial tradition is deeply embedded in this, and this tension that exists between accounting for facts and for manufacturing narratives. And so while this exhibition was biographical, I mean, you can't really see much of it there, but I tried to give an indication of the larger kind of structure that held these books. It was intended more so to excavate spaces between elements of design, elements of publication that informed the life and legacy of both these men. And I mention this because in telling these new narratives, in filling these missing gaps, what really I started to notice is that curating in itself takes on the task of history making. And Next page. I'm going to quickly breeze over this project, which was the Arkham project, before I go back to Diversifying. This was a project that I created with Indira van Klooster at Arkham in 2021, which served not only to present graphic design as elements in themselves, but to really explore what they represent. The project sought to explore how various social groups in the history of Amsterdam found ways to establish their safety and their visibility within the city, both within articulated moments of architecture and urban space, but also through elements of design and placards, signs, posters, etc. And so what you see in one of the slides on the far right is this kind of taxonomy that was developed to try to understand how each of these moments manifests and how they inform a specific set of visibilities for a specific social group. But then when I was putting together this work with the team at Arkham, what we started to realize was that by kind of working within this specific taxonomy, what you end up doing is not necessarily defining microhistories within a macroculture, but taking a macroculture and really subdividing it. So ultimately going against the effect that we were truly trying to aim for. And so within that narrative outlook, where something does not necessarily fit into those taxonomies, what you end up losing is these kind of more nuanced gestures and possibly the idea of what needs to be explored in terms of the visibility in the city. So here you have three simple examples of Ashanti, an independent Marxist women's magazine made for and by Surinamese women. The emergence of such women's organizations is not historiographically placed within the feminist framework, but they're othered to fit neatly within the Black and migrant ethnic minority movements. So this is not an othering that happened only historically. I mean, these spaces evolved basically from a dissatisfaction with the white feminist framework, but actually a sustained reading of history that continues to marginalize those groups and to set them as other, ultimately erasing any potentially colored voice from the white feminist framework. Within this feminist or queering lens, what would become a history of a collective like Sister Outsider, a group that was set up by lesbian women, trans women, queer Muslim women, Flamboyant, Strange Fruit. These are organizations that were created by queer Muslim Afro-Caribbean youth in the 1980s. So by stumbling across these small flyers in the archive, really reading them within a broader timeline, establishing how this could revise a very different history of Amsterdam that actually starts to show the versatility, but also the diversity of the community that is not necessarily just an emergent phenomenon, but something that has come to inform the contemporary condition. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I have 3 slides left, so I'll try to whisk through these. In Dit is Bremsela, the approach is not going to be as challenging. It's effectively going through the archive as a way of narrativizing a history of a gay couple, one of whom was a champion of gay emancipation in the Netherlands. To suggest a queering lens is to suggest something that is quite ordinary, but then what I did encounter using those methods and trying to explore intersectionality is maybe some smaller facts that needed revision. I mean, in this context, as a Jewish man who went into hiding, Benno Bremsela had 2 belongings on him during the Second World War, one of which was a Singer sewing machine, and the other was this book. This book, basically, if you go through this book, beautifully designed by Barbara Hepworth, the British sculptor, coincidentally, then you would come to really understand not only his practice, but really effectively so many levels of his aesthetic. And the way that translates into a series of photographs and posters that were designed by Otto Truman in 1961, understanding that the book that was in the poster as history recounts was meant to be his own book, but it's not because of the title on the page, on the cover that you see there, but you don't see in the photograph. So there's small moments like that. But then the crux of like the temporal kind of intersection that I really wanted to unpack, and which I started to in the exhibition, were the moments that I felt were overlooked by a canon of exhibitions that had already taken place about Benno Bremse, and which specifically tried to compartmentalize every single part of this man. Benno Bremse was a Jewish man. Benno Bremse was a designer. Benno Bremse was a figure and champion of gay emancipation. He was somehow never all those things, except he was all those things at the same time. In fact, him being a Jewish man, him hiding from persecution, choosing never to hide again after the Second World War, was the impetus for him to jump onto his position as a chairman of COC and to basically champion the gay emancipation movement. And it effectively, the reason why I bring this up at the end, I swear at the end, is that coincidentally it is the moment where he tries to bridge all those different things together is through a graphic design element. And it's specifically through the cover design of Friendship magazine, which was the COC member magazine. And I just find it brilliant because there are so many nuanced moments in this man that we know a lot about. He gave a lot of interviews. He spoke quite greatly about his practice and about his work. But we really never understood from those early moments how much he had tried to integrate and bridge those different aspects of his life. In a way, being as intersectional as we all want to and claim to be at this present moment in history. And so there are moments that you see in his practice where you have the window displays of the Bijenkorf. You find these characters, these kind of a same-sex couple being judged by a kind of a line of chairs, like a representation of like kind of society's judgment or disapproval. A character kind of caught in a whirlwind, around the same time kind of creating these kind of pivotal designs that we know Benno for now, the Benno mirror, the Rodina carpet design. But then ultimately the actual cover design becomes this way of imprinting all those different layers onto each other. And then to kind of somehow tie into a photograph that he actually got Paul Blanca to take of him, which also relates specifically back to the design of the mirror, of the cover, and of the carpet all at once. It's one of those things where I had to you had to go through the whole exhibit to really understand the full gravity of what it is I was kind of proposing, but I hope I managed to get some of it together clearly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. Oh my God, I could listen to that for a long time. It's so fascinating. But just to ask one question, you've done such a nice job of explaining how you work, right? How you see, how you dissect and understand visual culture through this intersectional lens. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a sense of how you tried to render that in space, in the exhibition? And maybe, you know, did it succeed? Did it fail? Or like, what did you try?
For sure, I think that's a very valuable question, and it's, I think, one that I will continue to interrogate through most of my career.
Well, you are an architect. So.
I am an architect, yeah. After 10 years practicing as an architect, I think exploring the spatial implication of everything is kind of intrinsic to what I do. And I feel like it's, so specifically within this exhibition, that element of establishing and kind of generating the right space came through the use of a very specific kind of color palette, which is the color palette of the rainbow. And this specifically was a reference to a building that was designed by Aldo and Hani van Eyck here in the Plantage, Milan, which is the Hubertus house, a house that was designed for single mothers in the 70s and the 80s. And the space in itself is this bouquet of color, this kind of kaleidoscope of different like a rainbow spectrum that creates that sense of inclusivity, creates that sense of safety. And so specifically in this moment, I maybe kind of went to a cliche and went to the rainbow, but I felt like it was a necessary representation of that through space.
Well, I want to ask you more about that, but we'll wait till the panel, because
Sure.
I think you go way beyond cliche, and I think that's what's so interesting, but I don't think it's an easy fix, is it? Just
No, for sure.
Anyway, but we'll get to it.
Great.
We'll pause for a moment and go on to our next speaker. Thanks so much, Ali.
Thank you very much.
Well, so thank you again. Our next speaker is, well, champion of the most slides, but I am assured that she will run through this like a maniac. Maureen Moore, a designer with extensive experience in designing for institutes, but also a professor at the Academy of Visual Arts in Leipzig. And Maureen has been responsible for the visual appearance of the Nieuwe Instituut, or Nieuwe Instituut, without the, sorry for that, since October 2013. So you're going into your 10th anniversary, I realized today. Crazy. Until 22, the identity consisted of continuously expanding a variety of designers anchored by the addition of a simple label. Nieuwe Instituut represents architecture, design, and digital culture, and while exhibitions devoted to graphic design are still rare at this institute, her approach to identity design, where a range of independent graphic designers have been selected to contribute designs by a rotating visual identity. Now, what's interesting is that last year, or this year actually, there's all of a sudden a redesign of an identity. In the gossip, I heard it was done with 10 or 15 designers. This turns out not to be true. Maureen said, no, it was just 5. Okay. Or 4, sorry, including you, right? Consisting of Jacob Hoving, Cengiz Menguc, Vera van der Sijp, and Maud Vervenne. And you, so 5. Maureen will discuss the process of creating this innovative house style and the extent to which the roles of curation and designer merge in such an initiative. Maureen Moore.
Is it working? Or do we have to turn it on? Is it working? Yeah. Or maybe I'll just sit down because I don't have to keep 2 things in my hand. I feel more comfortable. Hello, everybody. Hey, thanks for introduction, Roosje. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. So I have to talk about 10 years in 8 minutes. And 2 identities. So I have to run through it. Indeed, I'm the queen of the many images tonight, but I can already assume that it's still a part of it. I could have added maybe triple or 4 times. So, and I really miss a lot of things which should be in here, but not everything was on my computer, I have to say. Okay. Indeed, I'm a graphic designer and since 10 years responsible for the visual identity of the new institute. We're talking about graphic design in exhibition form. So how to present graphic design. Actually, indeed, like what Roosje already said in her introduction, that's not what we do at the new institute. But I think back then, 10 years ago, the director, Guus Buimer, immediately came up with the idea to involve many different designers. Because indeed, showing graphic design is something else than just putting graphic design in position, like by making it, by indeed putting it on the street. So in a way, I always said exactly, we make an exhibition about graphic design by all the things we produce. So by the exhibitions itself, where graphic designers have a very big role in it, but also in the communication. we worked already with a lot of designers. I already noticed that I missed even a few of them, but I think more than over 170, something like that. Not only graphic designers, also spatial designers, because both are very important. So, yeah, indeed, the exhibition and the spatial designers, the spatial designers and the graphic designers, they also collaborate a lot with each other. So very often with exhibitions, we start with the conversation. So indeed, we take them as early as possible in the stage of an exhibition. By working with a lot of designers for this identity, of course, we had to come up with an idea how to recognize the new institute as an institute. That was, of course, not such an easy question. And that was actually put on my table, so I had to solve it. And I came actually up with the idea of a label and not of a logo. Because I thought, if actually I'm going to produce a logo or make a logo, which every designer has to put on their poster or communication, I felt that we become the sponsor and not the initiator. So, and I also thought, like, what if we give rules to the designers, like working with a typeface, working with a specific color, or working with whatever kind of rules. We also give up like a certain space for the designers. So in that sense, I initiated this label, which became extremely neutral. And, but on the other hand, there was a lot of freedom for the graphic designer to develop their own language, which actually fitted with this specific exhibition. Some examples. More examples. So I'm going to actually show a lot of examples. I'm not going to explain every project. So billboards outside, booklets where you see the label, more booklets, more booklets, more booklets. Of course, sometimes the booklet goes together with an exhibition. Very often, actually, it is indeed connected, the graphic design, with also the communication on the street. So this was for Spectacular Design Archive, as you could see. The website was done by Studio Moniker. And on the website, we also created a space, because the website itself was mainly designed in this neutral identity. But each project had the space to integrate the campaign, which was more or less made for this specific exhibition. So also in the building, we actually worked with a lot of different designers. On the toilet. The toilets actually were, I think this is maybe a nice story to tell very briefly, because this was actually, the toilets were not really beautiful, and there was not really money actually to restore them. And since I'm teaching in Leipzig, the toilets are completely covered with graffiti. Really completely, everywhere. So whatever you, I mean, upside, downside, it's you know, on the toilet itself, everywhere. So I thought that could be kind of, it's so over the top, so I thought it's kind of interesting. And maybe I should, you know, even put like pencils, so to introduce, put pencils there. But then, of course, we are a design institute, so I also discussed it, and then we said, okay, no, maybe it should be somebody, you know, it should be a designer. And this is actually done by Roosje de Vries, who studied graphic design, but then went to the Rijksacademy and is now working as an artist. And what he did, he actually put this paint in this water sprinkling system. And it was turned on for, I think, 15 seconds, sorry, super short. And this was the result. But I thought it's something we can do super quick, it's easy, but at the end it was completely the opposite. Because we had to, painted completely white first, and then it had to be done with this painting for 15 seconds. And then, of course, because it needs to be for hygiene reasons, you need to be able to clean it. So it needs another layer on top of it. So it was much more expensive than this little thing. Anyway, now, during Corona times, of course, we also needed to come up with a signer system. And we thought, okay, let's not just only make it, we also invited an 75B, who made more or less like an autonomous work within a signer system. Now, also, this is with Koos and Jeanette, who collaborate a lot with each other. Also in the foyer itself, the presence of the designers, and in this case, photographer, and artist Frank Bruggeman. A campaign I did myself, also with the help of Carlos Kreesers, for the Fashion Museum. Now, as you could see, graphic design is everywhere in each exhibition, because we also need it as an exhibition. Because it's not an art institute where you have art in a white cube. So very often it's a lot about stories, or it's a lot about material which has to go through the hands of a graphic designer. Because, sometimes it's or very often. So also in this case, it was about infographics of the downside of the fashion world. So how can you make infographics? How can you also make it in that sense attractive? New Material Award. Lithium. This was also actually done with Katrien Bombe, who worked much more in an in theater environment. So she didn't do a lot of exhibitions. So I think we also very often ask and graphic designer to take the role of a spatial designer, or artist to take the role of a spatial designer, or the other way around. So it's also very often to see, okay, can you also sit on another chair? Of course, all these exhibitions have stories, but no time. And in this case, those are a few rooms, which is about the sociale. And they're still on view at the New Institute. They're very small rooms. And for those exhibitions, we actually ask designers to not only take the role of the graphic design and spatial design, but also take a responsibility in the research. So this was like these mini rooms where, in this case, a graphic designer and Tabea Nixdorf also really dived into the topic. Selected time, I think she was here last time, etc. So, and then also did the spatial design, and of course my role in this, that I propose very often the designers, or we do it in collaboration, and then actually I'm guiding the projects. Not always, it really depends also what is necessary. So of course for those who are inexperienced, I help them a lot, and for those who are extremely experienced, they don't need me. So it's, Okay, I'll just go quickly indeed, because indeed then Roosje actually asked also indeed about this collaborative about the new identity. The New Institute wanted to have a new identity specifically for marketing and communication. They wanted to be more visual as one kind of, more like one kind of identity. And then the question was, how are we going to do this? Because I think it's also, like special for the New Institute, as an institute also for design, to have this responsibility to give all these commissioners. So how can we not lose that? if we would give this to one company, it will always be this company which names appear on all the printed matter. And so can we still do something that we actually give also the space to more designers? So I proposed to Eric Cheng, the new director, to make a collective, to bring them together. They never worked with each other before, but a temporary collective which can grow. So we developed this identity. Actually, we started with 4. It was Cengiz, Vera, Maud, and myself. Vera actually already left. That's why I had 4 in my mind, because she was starting to study at MIT, and then Jacob already came in. And the idea is indeed that this, the group can grow. But of course, I mean, we were not able to make it with more than, you know, to develop the identity with so many people. Yeah. Maybe I'll do this very quick and brief and don't explain it.
That's it.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm. That was the last slide.
Yeah. Oh my God!
Okay.
Yay! Beautiful. And maybe just keep this rolling because it's so cheerful. I think thank you so much. If you probably showed a snippet of what you did in 10 years with all of the exhibitions. And all of those designers that we showed, there were, I don't know, hundreds maybe. I recently also had the joy to work actually with you on one of the shows. I wonder though, how does the selection, who chooses which designer works on what? And how do you do that? How do you choose? Because I know you work with experienced designers, but also sometimes with people that just freshly come out of the academy. So, how does that work? Can you give a bit of an insight on that?
I mean, of course, we first look what is the question to the designer. So what kind of exhibition is it? Because it mainly started with the exhibition.
Yeah.
So what is there? What do we need? Do we need only captions, or is there a lot of material? We need to go through the hand of the designer. And is there a big campaign on the street? Or is it very small? And what is the capacity of the curator? So is it an experienced curator? Or is there not really a curator? And a lot of researchers. Yeah. So we just looked at what do we need, indeed. Is there space for really young, unexperienced designers? Or do we need a designer who is, who we know, and we completely think, okay, we don't need to have a look at it. No. So, I think it's all these questions which are always on the table, and then we discuss it together.
And
with the team.
Do you see yourself as a curator then?
I mean, they gave me the title art director, and I thought, am I an art director, or I don't know. I'm still struggling with it. So, and now sometimes they said it's head design, but what does head design mean? And what does a curator means?
What is design, Maureen?
I call myself a graphic designer. So.
Well, maybe food for thought for the panel discussion. And thank you so much again, Maureen. We're moving to our last speaker of this evening. And Alice will make an introduction.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. That was amazing. All right, last speaker. So Elizabeth Clement, graphic designer as well, and co-founder with Peter Verbeeker of Sans Serif, a tiny and much-loved art and design bookstore in the heart of Amsterdam's red light district. Together with Laura Papa, Elizabeth organized the Asterix Summer School in her home country, Estonia. She also teaches at the Gerrit Rietveld Academy and edits and designs the publication series Apparition of the Ampersand. Great title. So we wanted Elizabeth to discuss how Sans Serif functions as a venue for exhibitions and events, but also, and perhaps that's what I meant by earlier when I was talking about the more than museums, you know, also how even as a bookstore, just being itself as a bookstore, in its careful curation of the best and most experimental examples of contemporary publishing, it performs as a significant exhibition space for graphic design. You know, an example of actually letting graphic design be itself, maybe. This is the question we put to you. Please welcome Elizabeth Clement.
Okay, let's see how this works. Firstly, I want to say, pour myself some water and thank you for the invitation. Roosje, Alice, Wim Crowell Institute. I'm going to try to close this before the panel talk starts. So I'm a graphic designer, as already announced. I have, since 2011, run this space together with my partner, Peter. We started on the sort of like downward spiraling wave of the recession and art cuts and so on. And there was a moment when we felt like, okay, we need a space in which publishing can exist. People have a reason to come together around elements of graphic design. We can build community and yeah, find reason and meaning for production of books, which was at that moment rapidly declining here. Also, someone just earlier mentioned the death of posters in 10 years. 10 years ago, people were talking about how e-books are going to overtake, and I don't see a zero sign of that. So here we are. We've been at this location since, I think, now 10 years. It's in the heart of the red light district. We are a very small bubble on the, kind of, with abrasion to the real world. And by real world, I mean outside of the door. Few people give a damn about what's inside. Often we hear grumblings about, oh, it's just books and so on. And I think that's a great place to be in. It's a good reality check for us. We don't see it in any other way. Sometimes people complain, why do I have to come here past all the tourists and whatnot? And I see that as existing within the realm where we actually all exist. So I don't see a need to go any further from that and pretend that this work exists in another context. So we don't have a storefront in a usual way, so we just have this garage type of space, around 50 square meters, that we have to work with. It's long and narrow, high as well, and a bit dark and dingy, as a side street of the red light district is. We have, over the years, built custom furniture for it, made ways in which we can work with the space so that whenever we have an event happening, we can either clear all the shelves away or we can make special arrangements to show works. The program that we run, also I want to say that we never wanted to be an institution. It's still a side thing, or like a fourth or a fifth of what we both do. So that's the way we enjoy running it, and it sometimes kind of shocks me when someone says that we're an institution. I never wanted to have any type of position as that. However, it seems like if you exist long enough, then you inevitably become something like this. And so we work kind of ad hoc, let's say. Obviously, there are themes that and publications we're interested in, people who approach us ourselves, who we approach, institutions we sometimes collaborate with having these launches of books or short-term exhibitions over the years. We recently counted, we have organized, I think, around, this is like a while ago, maybe 600 events and different things, and probably stuff that has slipped our minds. Usually you see kind of like on a daily basis graphic design exhibited in this kind of myriad of covers and stuff that we try to organize and make look nice. But then eventually this is like what happens, a mess, layering of things, nice books meeting ugly covers and vice versa, bad binding existing with good binding, things, notions of bad and good from different perspectives. And I think that's also something that over the years we have come to understand. And maybe, I think, Alice, you mentioned the most interesting, most experimental. I think that's a lens that I rarely look at things through. And maybe I can talk about that later. Anyway, so what do we use to show design? We have this facade, windows, these tiles that we occasionally send messages to the outside world or hide from the outside world. Here you see, on one hand, a moment in which the red light district was super intense, so we decided to mirror it off. Or in the middle, you can see an artist project, or actually a publishing project in which people could send in images depicted in media of climate change, and we would hang them up on the window. We have this gigantic wall in the space. We use that often for presentations. There's a lot of names that I'm going to forget now, and events and so on. So I'm just going to like click through it. Different ways in which this wall has made it possible for us to either show collections of posters. Here are protest posters from the Newmarket region, which is quite adjacent to where we are, and the Werke Collective made their collection public in the space around some discussions. It always serves as a great backdrop. We have a beautiful banner of Ivan Cheng's book, designed by Sabodeh. And obviously, the books that we show, or the design that we show, comes from all kinds of different sources, from artists, from writers, from everyday regular people, from sources of different urgencies. And sometimes elements of these originals that are in the books come to the space. So artworks kind of like live amongst the space for a while. We have the works of Philip Goffler here. Mark Rijdeles' piece was sitting in the storage room for a while. And this is actually, like, for me, the way in which design for real is shown in the shop. I find the most interesting tool for exhibiting design the voice, the body, the moments in which people who are actually making the work bring it to life through either reading the texts, interpreting the typography and the way that someone has intended a publication. These are highly undocumentable moments. It's a sort of a, you gotta be there to see it moment. And yeah, this is when things start to connect to people and you see like a duration in work. And so, yeah, here are a bunch of different examples of, I don't know, stuff going on. We also have taken a sort of a stance against official documentation and sharing that. So these images rarely really go anywhere other than this kind of a context. It's sort of connected to the temporality of how we work with exhibiting design and the speed at which many of these projects and events take place. Sometimes there's no exhibiting of anything, and people just hold up a book and talk about it, and seems like that's okay too, because the discussion still happens. And these pictures are kind of, you know, boring to show, yet there's a lot that you can do with presence and voice and idea in which you can translate design, voice design. I think that's something that's, yeah, still to be explored in a quite a, let's say, further setting. Here's Lina Gree, designer, publisher, reading her publication. And last slide, I promise. And then, as I said, we started to shop around this idea of community and connections and presence, people, these kinds of words that are dear to us. And on these blurry 2 slides, you can see Another way in which we are working with showing graphic design is our online presence, which after a million years has finally materialized. And we actually, it took so long because we were working on a really in-depth archive of looking at how different people who have either designed the publications, been editors, contributors, I don't know, somehow involved in different things that the shop brings together over the years, even things that maybe are not on sale anymore or available for people, but we wanted to document them on the website and archive them so that everyone can see the connections in which people work and trace someone's maybe multifaceted practice, as well as absurd keywords, or yeah, we wanted to find a way in which these things could live together, and so we have a website, and in the middle there's we had a little inside celebration of the website, and there's Jacob Dwyer eating a piece that has his book that he launched the previous evening on it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. That's brilliant. I love that. Highly undocumentable. It's excellent. And brave, I think, because in this world of ultra documentation. Okay, the quick question I'd like to ask is, I believe you have been included in another exhibition, in the Palace of Typographic Masonry exhibition. And I just wonder what that experience was like, and to what extent did you try and recreate this temporal, ephemeral liveness, or did you just have to readjust to the new circumstances? What, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess the act of, or like the life of being a graphic designer is adapting to circumstances. Mm-hmm. But Richard is here tonight, so I don't know how deep I can go. But actually,
ignore him.
It was a really great experience figuring out how I could fit into the palace as well. I actually worked together on this project together with Henk Groenendijk and Matthias Kreutzer, and it was a very specific framework of talking about the archive of student publications that Henk had been collecting as a retiring teacher from the Rietveld for, I don't know, decades, 30 years, and thinking about how something that is made on the inside, maybe not necessarily shared to the outside as a student, how that could reach an audience and what value that there is. And in that project, we actually also turned our lens to others, to bring other people towards the books and to talk about how they interact with them. I think one of the people, Lise, is also here tonight. So I think that yeah, I mean, for me, working with people and within a kind of collective setting is how I function. So I think that's just the nature of it, that in order to fit into the palace, I had to bring more people with me. So that's the answer.
Invaded it. It's a great answer. We're going to have lots more questions and answers. So please, can we invite our panelists to take their seats, and Roosje and I will hover around.
That's right. So welcome back everybody on stage. Ja, precies. Even een applausje. Superleuk.
There we go.
So we wanted to ask a couple questions just to get the discussion started. But then we also open up to you. Just wanted to say also how much it's appreciated if there's a question from the audience. So please don't be shy and think of a question.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of expertise in this audience.
True,
so
that's
it would
true.
be great to hear.
So I have a microphone.
But can I ask a question first?
Yeah, okay. Of course you can ask a question. We have two microphones. You have to hold the other one.
I've got this.
Yeah, so.
No, I think it's nice to have a bit of a panel first, and then we'll go to the audience, because I bet they've got questions for each other as well. But I just want to ask a little basic one. Having looked through these presentations in sequence, I thought was just fantastic, and really helped me process through that initial question I had about, which was yours, which was about graphic design in the white cube, and sort of seeing how that's evolved, I think, since 2006. And I have a question for you, whoever wants to answer it, which is kind of the tough one, I suppose. Do we need still a museum or an exhibition or a space, or a sanctioned space, labeled graphic design? Do we still need that? Is this important, and if so, why? Peter.
I don't know. I really don't know. I would argue that graphic design indeed is visible in many different forms and ways. And I don't know what the added value is in isolating it. So I do share the question with you.
Okay, come on, someone else.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
I just think that also, like coming from Eastern Europe, there's a very different sort of level of understanding of how design belongs to a specific context or not. And I think so. You almost have to you have to give a specific address to this question, because in some places the understanding is that it's redundant, and in others it's
they're
really
on different timescales.
Exactly, it's a question of urgency and like in what moment we are in order to define this as kind of valid.
It was
work.
exactly the same with our conversation with the archives last time, of course, because we had the ladies from the Syrian Design Archive, and for them it was essential to form an archive at the exact moment when other people were deconstructing their archive. So I take your point, but I think I just want to know from your own personal perspectives, from where you are. Anyone else want to add to it?
Now, I'm curious for Marina's take,
because of course say that absolutely we need spaces for dedicated 100% for graphic design. And the other question would be, why not? Whereas I think that as having been before being involved in this great institution, 100% dedicated, I was in really more confidential organizations of events around graphic design, and it's true that when it started to work out good, then there were some contemporary art institutions who little by little came to us and said, hey, we have artists, not designers, but contemporary artists who do posters. Why not doing something together? So this is something that, as graphic design it has this capacity of convergency, of bringing out different elements, maybe typography, visual, communication design, information design, data, etc. Everything can converge to graphic design, so it should also be emphasized and shown as which. And I think that this space of convergency where like anybody can say, hey, this is kind of design, huh? Why not? Why not showing? What I want to say that there is, at least in France, there is a huge space dedicated for contemporary artists. It's always a pity for me when we should kind of accept anything that deals with media that looks like graphic design, but made by contemporary artists, because I think that also design made by designers needs to be shown and also kept and really valorized as which.
I've thought, Maureen, actually you made such a brilliant point in your talk where you said actually all the exhibitions are graphic design exhibitions. And
in that context.
In that context, of course. So that I thought was really, really nice. And I thought, how would you see? Do you think it's necessary to make exhibition designs or designs about graphic design? When we can also do it your way.
Through design. It's about,
Yeah, I mean, if I think about a graphic design museum, I'm immediately thinking, what what to show there. So how do you do it? So what kind of... And then I also was thinking, because maybe I'm not the first person who will immediately go there.
And if you're not, then...
So that's... but on the other hand, I was also thinking, thinking about the network archives. I think it is super important somehow to archive graphic design.
And you see a distinction between
So if we think
that,
indeed that is important to do that, what's then going to happen with the graphic design who is in the archive?
Yeah, exactly.
So
we probably need both, right? I think.
But then it's a question, or at least I personally would be interested in how do you present it? And in what way? And how do you include indeed graphic designers in there? And of course, if if it's about graphic designer of designers who are still alive, then I think it's much more easy also to do something different. Actually, to give it as an assignment and then to make like a new work or whatever.
Yeah. Ali, do you want to chip in on this, or?
Yeah, potentially.
That's cagey, isn't it?
Well, I think there's something to be said about establishing more institutions, but potentially about exploring how these institutions function and to really understand that they, even as archives, they're not necessarily neutral. There's something that exists in the framework of the archival record that establishes certain exclusionary or limiting factors that will basically not necessarily prevent certain types of design from being included, but from, dare I repeat myself, certain voices from being excluded. And I think it's, you said something at the beginning about the messiness of potentially opening up the archive, of potentially opening up the canon. I mean, we talk about canon formation, we talk about the role of, let's say, women in design fields, in architecture, and ultimately it starts to establish a different view and different meritocracy with which to examine the historical record. And I think that's also really quite necessary. It's time for us to revise those kind of parameters that we've been using, and yes, include more archives, let's create more of them, but let's actually establish them for the right reasons and allow them to become more valuable for the future instead of just merely reflecting the present.
Yeah, and I think, well, what I'm getting out of all of this, is perhaps the moment for graphic design needing that sort of real urgency of creating that space. We may have moved through that to some extent, but what I still see is this need for exploration and framing and understanding of visual culture, which I understand to be this slightly larger realm, right, that enables more entry points, perhaps. To your point, but that's...
I'm also glancing into the audience if there is maybe already somebody who has a really good question, or maybe a really bad question, or a nice question. Yeah.
Did you have one earlier, Lise?
I see something
I
here.
think Lise has one as well, Roosje.
The moment
sorry,
is over.
we missed the moment past.
Okay, I have here.
Like you said.
I get a little nervous about the thought of shutting down opportunities for our profession to... Archives are places for self-reflection. I feel like we live in a generation with a lot of information, but with precious little self-reflection. I would want to ask, if we lose these spaces, what happens next? If we don't need these spaces, how do we drive the ship without these opportunities for performance or self-reflection?
Is this a question specific for someone?
Can I reframe that very slightly, though, just for this, because only just because I do want to really zoom it in on curation, on collections and exhibitions. I know archives are connected, but just if that's okay. It's similar. Go on, Peter. You can.
I think
I bring him in.
Alphabetical. No. I think the good reality check. I mean, we all love graphic design. I guess that's why we're here.
Yeah.
But a good reality check is always kind of reverse the roles. I think there are many other utilitarian professions and which don't have that representation that we are claiming to have. So I'm not sure if there needs to be museum of plumbing and museum of, I don't know, everything. While we
I
do
love
believe,
museums of plumbing.
yes, there should be one. I agree.
There are them.
Are there?
Yeah.
I also agree with the point that the self-reflection that can advance the profession, but I think there are the forms of reflection which can happen in different, in different forms, and I think you need to have this dialogue and exchange. And I'm not sure if the exhibition form allows for that exchange, and if it's the most fruitful one.
Right.
So.
But it also brings up, I think, you mentioned profession, and while that is certainly one audience, right? It's not the only one. Maybe you could speak to this, Maureen, a bit with what the new institute's trying to do. I'm just sort of guessing, I think a little bit, trying to sort of situate itself in a specific place, a community of Rotterdam. Is that true? No, I'm getting a lot of blank over here.
Yeah,
all right.
Just ask it again.
Well, the person asking the question was asking, God, we've got to say, we still need exhibition spaces for graphic design, so the profession can have a space in which to be reflective, I think I'm summarizing. And I'm saying, well, is the profession might only just be one audience for this? And I just wondered if you have experience of trying to expand the audiences for graphic design.
I mean, as a graphic design, or because at the New Institute you do a lot more than that. Don't make an exhibition about graphic design. So, but of course, there's all the time a discussion about like, is this, like these exhibitions, is it for a bigger audience or is it for the professional? Is it for the bigger audience or is it for the professional? Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, for example, then with the Premsele exhibition, Ali, what were you? Yeah, what kind of self-reflection were you imagining to take place in that space? And
oh, wow. I don't think any necessarily active one. I think the project in itself, even though the opportunity to go through all those different archives and explore all the graphic work that Premsele himself did, that Friso, his partner, did, and that was done throughout the course of their careers. It was very exciting. It was very beautiful to regard. I think there were certain moments where I felt like maybe presenting those in the same way that Peter was describing, showing like the full span of a process of a design, could be an exciting way of creating that sense of reflection, or maybe, I don't know, shedding some more light on the practice as such. But that also kind of would deviate away from the intention of the project, which was to reveal a specific relationship to printed matter, to books. So I think in my case, it was really more about kind of pushing away from the design. It was more contextual, less content-driven, as we would expect.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Did you want to add something in, or you want to wait for the next one?
I'm glancing meanwhile also again into the room. Huh? Yeah, don't be shy. Otherwise, we're just gonna continue here for a last question, I think, because we also need to round off soon. So if there's a last question from anybody here, we can. No. Well,
no,
Alice.
I've got many
then
more.
Maybe it's your last question.
Don't
then,
you
Alice.
want to ask one?
No, it's okay.
Well, I'd love to. I mean, this is really basic, but I just want to know what your favorite museums are, and your favorite place to go and see graphic design. I just want to know this. Come on, Ali, you're nodding. Do you?
I thought we would start from that side.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, Elizabeth.
This happened to me recently. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah, a tricky one.
It was a fever dream before the panel.
I can't answer that. I don't have a favorite museum to go see design at, but I think that, my favorite moments in meeting design are coming from people who are not designers. I'm sorry.
So, like such as?
I mean, people who have to solve communicating something. That's when, I don't know, the kind of like temporal nature of communication comes out, and it becomes interesting. It becomes.
But how does someone? You're privileged to get to witness that or be part of that because you're in the position perhaps of a commissioning agent or someone around the design. But how does someone else, like maybe, get to experience that same thing, that excitement you're feeling about something being, a communication problem being solved?
Obviously, I'm talking about your fruit vendor writing a great sign or giving directions in a way in which you think, wow, this has never been thought of. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just obviously I've had education in order to somehow exist in this world in which I know I have the tools to make things, and yet I can be surprised in the most simplest of gestures. That's, I don't know, that these are the things, but this is, you know, coincidental. Yeah. I don't go to this place. It happens to me.
Well, right, but there is a magazine whose tagline was "Examples of Unexpected Creativity." You did collect it in some senses, right?
Right. I think the ambition of the magazine was indeed this, that I think any institution or publication which tries to target very specifically certain demographic becomes too predictable, and it becomes just delivering narrow and narrow vision of itself, and looking to establish something that, you know, it will deliver something I don't know I'm looking for is, you know, it's a miracle, you know, and I'm looking for these kind of things. So that you had no idea something existed and you discover it along the way, rather than you decide, okay, I want to see this thing, and it confirms what you came to see. So, and I think it happens less often because of things tries to be very predictable and very labeled.
Well, partly because of the pressures that are put on museums, right? I mean, I'm thinking of the Design Museum in London, which basically has to deliver blockbusters in order to even survive. So, you know, this is the reality, I think, of why that's happening, this predictability. But you're not allowed to say the name of one institution. You have to pick another one.
Yes, I must say that I'm very fond of going to graphic design festivals. I still have this perhaps the tradition, Chaumont tradition, also to go and to the different encounters. And yes, I think that what I've always also liked before working to Chaumont, going to Chaumont as tourist, is always to the meetings, gatherings. There are exhibitions, but there are also people that you just grab a beer with and have a talk about what's going on. And so I'm quite a good festival visitor.
And
I'm
maybe
going
also
Belformat, Breda, INTL, etc. So
yeah, okay, sorry to
combining exhibitions, talks, workshops, etc. So that's.
But I'm just wondering that maybe why you find that so appealing is just because, again, the temporality of it all is the container, is the emphasis.
Yes. I think that yes, but also what's interesting also with graphic designers, not being designer myself, especially, is also all these different layers of the work and all the big investment of designers who become also very often actually, much more than designers. May they be even editors at the same level as the editor, curators, etc. So all these different competencies, all these different worlds that designers share is very precious for me to witness.
I kind of have to also mention that it is 10 o'clock right now. So,
all right. I didn't bring my
and also there's people working here under conditions.
Can we just say the name of the favorites? The name.
Yeah,
and then we finish.
Is there a favorite place where you go to? Your favorite to go to place for design exhibitions?
No, you won't press me for an institution.
Okay,
fine.
Mine's the British Library. Just went, fantastic, very good exhibitions, and the Welcome collection.
And
welcome.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Just throw that in there.
Okay.
Couple I saw last week. Maureen, do you want to mention one, or you're going to pass?
I think then I would choose graduation shows
Yeah,
of
beautiful,
students.
beautiful, and very timely because they all
That's
are
good.
on right
Good
now.
timing because The Hague, I think, is opening tomorrow. Rietveld next week. I don't know all of those dates, but please visit them because they're indeed great. One thing that I wanted to do before we close off, because I actually was bridging towards the workers here, and one of the workers here worked here for 6 years, and this is her very, very last event.
Yeah.
And it's Anna Kok, and she's sitting there. Anna, I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Anna has worked here for 6 years and was a very trusted partner of It's All Graphics. So I just wanted to thank you again for joining us this evening, and I hope you enjoyed this last event with us. I unfortunately need to wrap it up and thank also, the speakers, Ali Tiassad, Maureen Moren, Marina Bakic, Peter Bilak, Elisabeth Clement, and of course my partner in crime, Alice Twemlow. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's go wrap it up.
Thank you.
And the bar is open,
Yeah,
I
let's
wanted
go
to
down
say.
for drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.